The Cthar Empire's ships loomed on the edge of the Sol system, their black hulls reflecting the cold vacuum of space, like predators circling their prey. They were vast and terrifying, entire fleets of these massive warships moving together as one massive armada, a true sight to behold. The Cthar commanders watched from their flagship, their confidence absolute. They had seen countless worlds fall to their might, and they had no doubt Earth would fall as well, their technology light years ahead of anything humanity possessed. They couldn't fathom that such a young and primitive species could mount any serious resistance, and so they did not hesitate. They moved with the unrelenting speed and force of a storm. Commander Thalrith of the Cthar stood in the command center of the flagship, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic map of Earth's defenses. He knew that this would be an easy victory. The humans had no true weapons against their fleet. Their cities would burn within hours, and the remaining survivors would be left in despair. But there was something that stirred in the back of his mind, a nagging feeling, something he couldn't quite place. But he pushed it away, brushing it off as the arrogance of the human species. They had never faced anything like the Cthar before. The command was given, and the Cthar fleet began its descent into the atmosphere, their weapons charged and ready. The first blast struck Earth's outer defenses, a wave of energy that hit with such force that it shattered entire satellites in orbit, leaving the sky filled with drifting debris. Across the planet's surface, alarms blared in every human city as the military scrambled to respond. But the Cthar's advance was swift, and sure, they were upon them before the humans could even begin to organize themselves. Earth's defense systems were outdated at best. They had never prepared for something like this. Humanity had spent centuries fighting its own battles, never anticipating that a force from beyond the stars would come knocking on their door. The first few hours were chaos. Earth's military forces sent every available ship into space, attempting to form a line of defense. But they were no match for the Cthar's sheer numbers and firepower. Cthar warships vaporized entire fleets in seconds, their weapons torn through shields and armor like paper. There were no evasive maneuvers that could save humanity's forces. As the Cthar began their full assault on the planet's cities below, the Earth was a fiery wasteland. As military bases fell one by one to the overwhelming onslaught, humanity had never known such devastation. But even as all seemed lost, the Cthar commanders noticed something strange. A signal appeared on their scanners. A lone human warship emerged from the darkness of space. It was small compared to the immense Cthar fleet, barely more than a speck against their colossal warships. But it moved with an odd confidence, its course set directly toward the heart of the Cthar invasion. Fleet Commander Thalrith scoffed. This ship would be no different from the others. It was just one more dying flicker in the face of their power. But something about it tugged at his instincts. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was different, that the humans were preparing something they hadn't seen before, something unknown. The Cthar fleet moved to ignore the speck of a warship that dared challenge them. But then the unexpected happened. As the human ship drew closer, it fired its first shot, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The first shot from the human ship cut through space with a brilliant flash, its energy beam sharp and precise, a streak of light that shattered the silence of space and hit one of the Cthar's smaller frigates dead center. The Cthar ship's shields flared briefly before they buckled and exploded in a fiery burst as the frigate's core detonated, sending a shockwave rippling through the surrounding fleet. For a moment, the Cthar were stunned, not just by the destruction, but by the audacity of the attack. This wasn't the desperate last stand they had expected from the humans. This was something different. It was a challenge, and they didn't know how to react. Commander Thalrith stared at the readings in disbelief for several moments. He quickly issued orders to his fleet commanders to regroup and bring the full force of their armada to bear on the human ship. They couldn't let this insignificant speck of a warship defy them, not after all they had accomplished. But something strange happened. As the Cthar ships moved in, the human ship didn't flee. It didn't even try to escape. It held its ground, as though it knew that the very act of running would be the end of them. Instead, it fired again, this time with a rapid series of pulses that pierced through the space between the two forces with uncanny accuracy. And when the blasts hit another Cthar ship's shields failed instantly, as though the shields themselves had never existed at all. The Cthar fleet's confidence began to waver as more of their ships fell to the relentless barrage. The human warship wasn't retreating or running, it was fighting back with all the ferocity of a cornered animal. And the strange thing was, it wasn't just firing randomly. It was using a kind of strategy. The Kthar hadn't anticipated. Every shot seemed to be placed with precision and purpose, each strike taking down a different part of their fleet's structure. The human ship's crew was communicating on a level that suggested they had been preparing for this battle for years, not days or weeks, as the Kthar had assumed. Captain Elara Drake watched the chaos unfolding on the bridge of the Valkyrie. Her heart pounded in her chest, not with fear, but with excitement. The adrenaline coursed through her veins as she directed her crew to fire at the weak points of the Kthar ships. She knew they were outmatched in size and power, but the one thing the Kthar didn't have was the human will to fight. They underestimated the ingenuity of her crew and the spirit of humanity itself. She could feel it in every decision, every calculated move they made together. They were a force that could not be predicted, no matter how advanced their enemy's technology was. The Kthar fleet continued to underestimate them as wave after wave of Kthar ships moved toward the Valkyrie, and with every wave the humans found another way to strike back, another way to turn the tide in their favor. Commander Drake's hands moved swiftly across the controls, guiding the ship as it dodged blasts and launched counterattacks that surprised even the Kthar generals who had been confident moments before. Soon the Kthar began to realize something startling. The Valkyrie wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of resistance, something the Kthar could not fully comprehend. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore, it was a statement. The fleet's commanders scrambled to respond, but their strategies faltered as the human ship adapted faster than they could predict. It was a game of cat and mouse where the Valkyrie was always one step ahead, and the Kthar began to wonder if they had truly prepared for an enemy like this at all. The battle between the Valkyrie and the Kthar fleet escalated with every passing minute. The Kthar commanders grew more and more frantic as their once flawless strategy unraveled in the face of an opponent they couldn't predict. Human ingenuity was proving to be more than just a nuisance. It was an absolute disruption. The Kthar's superior weapons and numbers had given them confidence, but now they were fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of human warship, that moved with an almost unnatural grace, its tactics unpredictable and devastating. Commander Thaurith paced nervously across the bridge of his flagship, his fingers tapping the sides of his chair as he stared at the live feed of the Valkyrie, tearing through his forces. The human ship had already destroyed 3 of his best ships in the past half hour, each one with methodical precision, and now it was engaging with another of his elite destroyers, the Kthar fleet's pride and joy, the largest and most advanced warship in their entire armada. And yet the Valkyrie was already chipping away at its defenses with relentless efficiency. The ship's energy weapons were like knives, carving through the destroyer's shields and armor like they were paper. Thaurith growled in frustration as he watched the human warship execute a near-perfect evasive maneuver, dodging an entire barrage of plasma fire that had been launched directly at it, with barely a flicker of movement from the Valkyrie itself. It was as if the ship and its crew were anticipating their moves before they even made them, something the Kthar had never experienced before. How could they counter it? He was beginning to suspect that the Valkyrie wasn't relying on pure chance the way the humans on board were thinking. Their movements felt coordinated, like a well-rehearsed dance that knew exactly when to strike and when to evade. Back on the Valkyrie, Commander Drake was calm and collected despite the mounting pressure. The bridge hummed with a controlled urgency, but she kept her focus steady. Her crew was working in perfect harmony. Every officer and technician knew their role and performed it without hesitation. The Kthar were overwhelming in size and technology, but humanity had one advantage: they had always been the underdogs. They had always had to innovate or perish. They were quick learners, and the Valkyrie's crew had been honing their skills for years. They had studied every known strategy and tactic the Kthar had ever used, adapting them and perfecting them until they were ready to face a threat like this. Drake's eyes narrowed as she directed her crew to engage the Kthar destroyer again. Another barrage of missiles launched from the Valkyrie, targeting the weak spots in the Kthar ship's shields. And once again, the Kthar's superior technology failed to predict the human response. It wasn't just the weaponry that was catching the Kthar off guard. It was the precision with which the Valkyrie attacked. Every action seemed perfectly timed, every strike calculated to exploit a flaw in the Kthar's defenses. And that flaw was growing more and more obvious. The Kthar had never fought an enemy that fought back with such calculated precision. They had underestimated the humans' ability to think and adapt under pressure, and it was proving to be their undoing. The Kthar commanders began to issue orders to reinforce their positions, but it was already too late. The damage had been done. Their elite ships were falling one by one, and no matter how many new waves of ships they sent, the Valkyrie was always there waiting for them. With an answer to every move they made, the Kthar were losing their confidence. The very thing that had once made them so formidable was now the thing that worked against them. Their overconfidence had blinded them to the truth. Humanity would not be easily defeated. They had underestimated the depths of human resilience and adaptability, and now they were paying the price for it. The Valkyrie danced through space like a predator on the hunt, its weapons striking with surgical precision, every attack calculated and deliberate. Commander Drake's mind raced as she tracked the movements of the Kthar fleet, her eyes never leaving the tactical display on the bridge. The Kthar destroyer that had once seemed an unstoppable force was now drifting, its movements sluggish as its engines struggled to keep it from falling into disarray. The human warship had already disabled its shields and crippled its weapon systems with a series of well-placed strikes. The Kthar ship was now nothing more than a target. "Commander," said Lieutenant Collins, the ship's weapons officer, his voice tense but filled with determination. "The enemy's main reactor is exposed. We can take it down with one more shot." Drake didn't hesitate. "Do it." With a focused swipe of her hand, Collins fired a concentrated energy pulse directly at the destroyer's reactor. The explosion was instantaneous. A burst of white-hot energy erupted from the ship's center, and within moments, the Kthar destroyer was reduced to debris, scattering like ashes into the void. The Valkyrie didn't even flinch as the shockwave passed harmlessly around it. A triumphant cheer erupted from the crew, but Drake quickly raised her hand to silence them. They couldn't afford to be distracted. The Kthar were not done yet. In fact, this victory had only set the stage for something more dangerous. As she scanned the tactical map, she saw what they had been waiting for. The Kthar flagship was moving forward, cutting a path through the wreckage of their fallen ships. It was massive, a floating fortress bristling with weapons, and it was now aiming its full firepower at the Valkyrie. "Here we go," Drake muttered under her breath, the edge of a smile tugging at the corner of her lips. She had known this would happen. The Kthar would send their best ship to crush her. The challenge only made her more determined. The flagship fired first, its plasma cannons launching a barrage of high-energy beams directly at the Valkyrie. But Drake was ready. She had studied the patterns of the Kthar's attacks and knew exactly what they would do. She commanded the ship to swerve hard to the left, the ship's engines roaring as it responded to her command. The plasma beams missed, striking empty space where the Valkyrie had been just a moment before. The Kthar flagship, clearly confident in its superior firepower, continued to pour energy into the empty space, unaware that the human warship was already repositioning for its counterstrike. Drake's voice rang out sharply. "Target their engines. Full power to the forward plasma cannons." A sharp jolt of energy coursed through the ship as the Valkyrie fired its own weapons at the massive Kthar flagship. The blasts hit their mark, sending shockwaves through the enemy vessel as the flagship's outer shields buckled under the pressure. The Valkyrie pressed the attack, never giving the Kthar flagship a chance to regroup. With every calculated strike, it was clear that the flagship was not the invincible behemoth it had appeared to be. Even the mighty Kthar had vulnerabilities. "Damage report," Drake ordered, her voice steady despite the rising chaos around them. "Minor hull breaches on Deck 5, said Commander Hayes, the ship's tactical officer, her eyes flicking rapidly between data streams. "But nothing we can't handle. We're still in the fight." Drake nodded. Keep pushing. If we can cripple their engines, the rest of the fleet will fall into disarray. They'll have no way to regroup. The crew responded with renewed vigor. The Valkyrie darted forward, weaving in and out of the Kthar flagship's line of fire, each evasive maneuver executed with the precision of a well-practiced drill. The Kthar flagship fired again, but this time, the shot missed entirely, a testament to how much the human crew had learned about their enemy's tactics in such a short time. The Valkyrie was becoming more than just a ship. It was a weapon of unparalleled resilience, an embodiment of humanity's refusal to be crushed under the weight of a superior enemy. The Kthar flagship, now heavily damaged, started to slow, its movements uncoordinated and erratic. Commander Thalrith, watching from the safety of his command center, was beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. The Valkyrie was not only surviving, it was outsmarting them at every turn. "Full retreat," he ordered, his voice tight with disbelief. "Pull back. Now." It was too late. The Valkyrie fired once more, hitting the Kthar flagship's engine core. The explosion was cataclysmic, lighting up the dark expanse of space like a second sun. As the flagship crumbled, the remaining Kthar fleet faltered, their morale shattered by the loss of their most powerful ship. The tide was turning, and humanity had just made it clear. They would not go down without a fight. The Valkyrie hovered in the wake of the Kthar flagship's explosion, the void of space filled with the wreckage of what had once been a proud armada. The shockwave from the blast rippled outward, tearing through Kthar ships like paper. As the remnants of the enemy fleet scrambled to regroup, Commander Drake's fingers flew across the controls, scanning the battlefield with laser focus. The Kthar were in disarray, but they weren't retreating. Not yet. There was something in their strategy, something lurking beneath the surface, that suggested they weren't giving up so easily. "We've broken their backbone, but they're still a threat," Drake muttered to herself, watching as the remaining Kthar ships regrouped at the edge of the chaos. They were preparing for something big. She knew the Kthar didn't give up without a final devastating blow, and the Valkyrie, battered though it was now their target. "Captain," said Lieutenant Collins, his voice tense, "scans are showing a significant energy buildup. It looks like they're charging up a planetary-scale weapon." Drake's eyes narrowed. She had known this moment would come. The Kthar would not allow themselves to be embarrassed in front of the galaxy. This was the last stand, their ultimate weapon, capable of wiping out entire planets in a single shot. If it fired, Earth would be lost. "Can we intercept it?" Drake asked, already formulating a plan in her mind. They had to stop this weapon from firing, or everything would be for nothing. The Earth's defenses had been overwhelmed. Only the Valkyrie stood between total annihilation and humanity's survival. "We'll have to get close," Collins replied, his voice tight with urgency. "Too close, but we might be able to disable the weapon's firing mechanism if we can slip past their defenses." Drake's heart raced. She could feel the weight of the decision on her shoulders, every life on Earth hanging in the balance. But she didn't hesitate. She had led them this far, and she wasn't about to stop now. "Helm, full speed ahead," she barked. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Tactical, target the weapon systems. We're taking the fight to them." The Valkyrie surged forward, its engines roaring with the power of humanity's last hope. The Kthar fleet, now scrambling to launch their final weapon, didn't expect the human warship to charge directly toward them. The few Kthar ships that tried to intercept the Valkyrie found themselves caught in a whirlwind of evasive maneuvers, the human ships slipping between their weapons' fire with precision only possible through sheer instinct and experience. "Firing," shouted Commander Hayes as the Valkyrie's plasma cannons unleashed a concentrated burst at the Kthar weapon array. The energy beams cut through the first layer of defenses, but the Kthar were ready. They were determined to see this weapon fired. Drake's eyes flicked to the status board, seeing the rapidly closing gap between them and the Kthar weapon platform. They were so close now she could almost feel the hum of the alien technology pulsing through the Valkyrie's hull. "They're going to fire," Collins shouted, panic creeping into his voice. The energy beam of the Cthar weapon began to glow, charging up with destructive power. "We won't let that happen," Drake replied, her voice low and steady, knowing full well the risk they were about to take. With a final surge of speed, the Valkyrie shot forward, just as the massive Cthar weapon fired a burst of destructive energy at the Earth below. The energy beam blazed across space, and for a moment, it looked like the end. But at the last instant, Commander Drake executed a daring maneuver, twisting the Valkyrie into a sharp dive, sending it plummeting beneath the beam's path. As the Valkyrie pulled away from the Cthar weapon's trajectory, the energy blast passed just overhead, missing them by mere meters. The Valkyrie's hull shuddered from the blast wave, but it remained intact, undeterred. "We're in range," Hayes called out, ready to disable their weapon. Drake's eyes locked onto the weapon's exposed core, the final target of their mission. With a final, commanding gesture, she ordered the crew to fire everything they had. The Valkyrie's weapons discharged in unison, the concentrated blasts of energy slamming into the core with devastating force. The Cthar weapon systems began to flicker and spark, their once pristine efficiency crumbling under the relentless assault. The Cthar flagship was done. Their final weapon had been destroyed. The surviving ships of the Cthar fleet began to fall into chaos as their last hope vanished in an instant. Commander Thowrath watched in disbelief from his command center. His forces were crumbling, and the humans had proven themselves more formidable than he had ever imagined. There would be no victory for the Cthar today, and the galaxy would never forget the day humanity stood its ground. The Cthar fleet was in disarray, their final weapon reduced to smoldering debris, the last vestiges of their offensive power now gone. The Valkyrie hovered at the center of the chaos, its weapons charged and ready for the next phase of the fight. Commander Drake's mind raced as she reviewed the battlefield. The Cthar were retreating, fracturing under the pressure, but they weren't done yet. There was a final gambit yet to come, something she knew would test her crew's resolve in ways they hadn't yet encountered. "Damage report, Lieutenant," she said, her voice calm despite the pounding of her heart. "Minimal," Collins replied, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of tension. "We've lost a few minor systems, but nothing critical. We're still operational, Captain." Drake nodded. The Valkyrie had taken a beating, but they were far from out of the fight. The damage they'd inflicted on the Cthar had bought them a critical edge, but she knew the Cthar were not the type to retreat without launching one final strike. She turned her attention to the Cthar fleet, which was now regrouping into formation. It was almost as if they had been waiting for this moment, a signal, a final rallying cry. In the distance, the large silhouette of a Cthar super-dreadnought appeared, larger and more menacing than any ship they'd faced so far. This was the true heart of the Cthar fleet, the centerpiece of their offensive power. It was heavily armored, bristling with energy cannons, and capable of devastating anything in its path. The remaining Cthar ships moved to form a defensive perimeter around the dreadnought. "This is it," Drake murmured under her breath. "They're going for the kill." "Captain," said Commander Hayes, her voice a low murmur filled with concern. "The super dreadnought is locking onto us. It's preparing to fire." Drake's eyes locked on the looming dreadnought, the overwhelming power of his weapon systems now fully charged. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. A single shot from that ship could erase them from existence, but there was no choice now. She had to go on the offensive. "Helm, prepare for evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "We'll take it head on." "What?" Collins blurted. "Captain, we can't survive a direct hit from that thing. We have tow." Drake cut him off, her voice sharp. "We don't have time for fear. If we can't stop it, Earth is finished. We take the fight to them. Now." The crew fell silent as they processed the enormity of what she was asking. But then, without a word, they moved into action, preparing for a gambit that only a few could have dared. The Valkyrie surged forward, its engines roaring as the ship tore through the void of space toward the Cthar super dreadnought. The Cthar fired first, energy beams flashing from the dreadnought's cannons, filling the space between the two ships with deadly force. Drake's hands flew over the controls, guiding the Valkyrie in a series of rapid evasive maneuvers. The ship twisted and dove, barely missing the deadly blasts, each one coming too close for comfort. The crew held their breath as the ship dipped and darted through the firestorm, their shields flaring brightly with every close call. "Captain, they're locking on to our rear," Collins warned. "We can't keep this up forever." But Drake didn't flinch. Her eyes remained fixed on the target ahead. The super dreadnought's main reactor was vulnerable, a weak point that could destabilize the entire ship if they hit it just right. It was a gamble, but it was the only chance they had. "Prepare the main guns," Drake ordered. "Full power to forward weapons. We're going to hit it with everything we've got." The Valkyrie twisted again, now directly in line with the massive Cthar ship. The super dreadnought unleashed another volley, but this time Drake was ready. The Valkyrie's engines flared to life, surging with raw energy as the ship barreled forward at impossible speed, just inches from the incoming fire. "Fire," Drake commanded, her voice low and full of purpose. The Valkyrie's weapons discharged with the force of 1,000 storms, energy beams, and missiles slamming into the super dreadnought's exposed reactor. The Cthar ship groaned under the impact, its shields buckling as the barrage tore through its outer layers. But the real damage came when the final blast struck the reactor's core. There was a moment of silence, as if space itself held its breath. And then, an explosion that lit up the stars. The super dreadnought's core erupted in a violent cascade of energy, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The remaining Cthar ships, stunned by the destruction of their flagship, faltered. The Valkyrie pulled away just in time, avoiding the blast radius as the Cthar ship disintegrated in a brilliant flash. The Cthar fleet, now leaderless and crippled, began to scatter. Some ships attempted to regroup, while others turned and fled, unwilling to face any more of humanity's wrath. The battle was over. The Valkyrie had struck the killing blow. Drake watched as the last remnants of the Cthar fleet disappeared into the distance, the stars slowly returning to their silent, distant glow. Her heart pounded in her chest, but there was no time to savor the victory. There was still much to do. Earth still needed her. But for the first time since this war had begun, she allowed herself a moment of relief. Humanity had won. The battle was over, but the echoes of it still rang in Commander Drake's mind. The Valkyrie had triumphed over the Cthar, but at what cost? The crew was battered, their ship scared from the relentless assault they had endured. Yet there was no time for rest. The war was far from over. The Cthar were not a race to accept defeat quietly, and even now, Commander Drake knew that this victory was but a momentary reprieve. There was a greater war yet to be fought, one that would determine the fate of humanity and the entire galaxy. "Captain," Lieutenant Collins said, his voice solemn as he glanced at the tactical display. "Scans show the remnants of the Cthar fleet are retreating into deep space. They're abandoning their invasion of Earth for now." Drake's gaze shifted to the display. The Cthar ships, now broken and scattered, had begun to flee. But their retreat wasn't just a sign of defeat, it was a strategy. She knew they wouldn't stop trying to find a way to take Earth. It was the most vulnerable point in the galaxy, and they'd learned that the humans were far stronger than they had anticipated. The Cthar would lick their wounds, rebuild, and strike again when the time was right. "Prepare for emergency landing protocols," Drake ordered, her voice steady despite the weight pressing on her chest. "We've won this battle, but Earth isn't out of danger. We need to regroup, report back to command, and fortify our defenses." "Understood, Captain," Collins responded, quickly relaying the orders to the rest of the crew. Setting coordinates for Earth's orbit. As the Valkyrie turned back toward Earth, Drake couldn't help but think of the families, the millions of people who had no idea how close they had come to annihilation. The threat had been real, and humanity had been on the brink of extinction. The Kthar's technology, their relentless assault, had brought humanity to the edge of despair. But against all odds, humanity had fought back. Against all odds, they had stood firm. "Captain," Commander Hayes called out, "we've received a communication from Earth's defense network. They're requesting our status. They've lost contact with several fleet groups." Drake nodded. "Patch them through. It's time to let them know what happened." A moment later, the screen flickered, and a familiar face appeared. General Santiago, the commander of Earth's primary defense forces. His face was weathered, but his eyes were sharp. "Commander Drake," he said, relief flooding his voice as he saw her. "We were beginning to fear the worst. Reports from the outer colonies suggested a Kthar victory was imminent. What's the situation?" Drake took a breath, steeling herself before speaking. "General, we've successfully repelled the Kthar invasion. Their fleet is in retreat. The immediate threat to Earth is neutralized. However, this victory is only temporary. The Kthar will regroup. They've already seen what humanity is capable of, and they won't stop until they've eradicated us. We need to fortify every defense and prepare for the next phase." Santiago's eyes hardened. "Understood. We've already begun the process of rebuilding our forces, but we'll need your report to fully assess the damage. If we have any chance of repelling another invasion, we'll need every ship, every weapon we can muster." "We're on our way," Drake replied. "But it's not just about building defenses anymore. We need to go on the offensive. We need to hit them before they have a chance to recover. We've seen how they fight. They won't hesitate to use their superior technology to crush us again. But we've also shown them that they can be beaten." Santiago nodded grimly. "I agree. We'll start preparations on Earth's end. Let us know when you're ready to return." The screen flickered off, leaving Drake with the weight of their conversation settling heavily in her chest. The Kthar had underestimated humanity, and that mistake had cost them dearly. But there would be no complacency. The next time the Kthar attacked, humanity would be ready. "Commander," Hayes said, breaking the silence, "we've received another transmission. It's from Admiral Logan of the Earth Defense Fleet." Drake leaned forward, her brow furrowing. "Put it through." The image of Admiral Logan appeared, his face grave but resolute. "Drake," he began, "you've done something that no one thought was possible. The Kthar's invasion force is shattered, but Earth is still vulnerable. We've got intel that suggests they're gathering reinforcements, possibly a second wave. The question now isn't whether we'll survive, it's how we'll make sure they never come back. I need your team to help lead the charge." Drake's grip tightened on the console as she stared into Logan's eyes. The challenge ahead was clear. The Kthar would return, but humanity wouldn't just wait for them to strike. They would take the fight to the enemy, and they would make sure that Earth would never again face such an overwhelming force without a fight. "Count us in," Drake said, her voice firm. "We're ready to end this, once and for all." With that, the Valkyrie turned toward Earth, its crew united in the knowledge that their victory had only just begun. The Valkyrie entered Earth's orbit once more, the battered but unbroken warship now a symbol of humanity's resilience. Commander Drake stood at the helm, watching as the vastness of the planet below unfolded in her view. Earth was scared, its defenses stretched thin, but it was still alive, still fighting, and as long as humanity had breath in its lungs, they would keep fighting back. "Captain," Lieutenant Collins's voice broke through the silence, "we're being hailed by Admiral Logan. He's ready for the briefing." Drake nodded, turning toward the communication console. "Put it through." The face of Admiral Logan appeared on the screen, his expression weary but determined. "Commander Drake," he said, nodding in recognition, "the situation is dire, but we got one shot to end this. We've confirmed that the Kthar are already regrouping. Our intelligence shows they've sent out a distress signal to their homeworld, likely calling for reinforcements. We don't have much time. Drake's jaw clenched. The Cthar were tenacious, that much was clear. But humanity had proven they could not be crushed. Not yet. I've already prepared the Valkyrie for the next phase of the assault, she said, her voice steady. If they're calling for reinforcements, we need to hit them first, before they can regroup and build a new fleet. We take the fight to their doorstep. Logan's eyes narrowed. You're suggesting we go to their homeworld? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Drake replied, a spark of resolve in her eyes. We know where they're based. We've seen their patterns. If we can disable their homeworld's production facilities, their ability to rebuild their fleets will be crippled. We go in fast, hit them hard, and don't give them a chance to recover. A tense silence hung in the air. Logan was clearly weighing the risks. He knew it wasn't just about victory anymore. It was about survival. It's a dangerous gambit, he finally said, but it's the only one that might work. The Cthar won't give up easily, and their homeworld will be well defended. We're human, Drake said, her voice a little fiercer. We fight harder when the odds are against us. I'm confident we can do this. The Valkyrie is ready, and my crew is ready. We'll make sure the Cthar never threaten Earth again. Logan met her gaze for a moment, as if searching for any sign of doubt. Finding none, he nodded. All right, Commander. Prepare for the mission. We'll gather the rest of the fleet and follow your lead. We'll give you the backup you need, but the first strike is yours. We'll move out in the next few hours, Drake said, already formulating the plan in her mind. The Cthar homeworld won't know what hit them. As the transmission ended, Drake turned to her crew. You heard the Admiral. This isn't just a mission. It's the final step in ensuring our survival. We're not just fighting to defend Earth anymore. We're going on the offense. The Cthar thought they could wipe us out. They were wrong. The crew exchanged determined looks, knowing that the weight of this mission wasn't just a matter of strategy. It was personal. Every member of the Valkyrie had seen firsthand what the Cthar were capable of. They had faced near extinction and survived. And now, they would ensure that humanity's strength was felt across the galaxy. We've trained for this, Commander Hayes said, her voice resolute. We're ready. Drake nodded. Then let's finish this. The Cthar won't be the only ones learning to fear humanity. The Valkyrie powered up its engines, the hum of its systems vibrating through the ship. The crew worked quickly, methodically preparing for the journey to the Cthar homeworld. As the warship broke through Earth's atmosphere and into deep space, Drake stared out at the stars, knowing they were venturing into the unknown. But this time, they weren't going in as the underdogs. They were going in as humanity's finest, with one singular purpose: to crush the Cthar threat once and for all. The crew stood united, each person fully aware of the risks, but each also knowing that this was their chance to rewrite the future. A future where humanity had not only survived but had triumphed, proving that no alien force, no matter how powerful, could ever extinguish the flame of human ingenuity and determination. The Cthar had underestimated them. Now, they would learn to regret it. And Commander Drake knew, without a doubt, that this time, humanity would be the ones to strike the final blow.